Absolutely. And that's a requirement given that none of the top contenders for this election received over 50% of the vote. And so we've had an election that's been closer than in previous years.
Were you surprised at the final result?
I wasn't surprised at the final result. I think there was a lot of momentum being built by the primary or the winner of the elections, Anura Kumar Dissanayake, over time. In particular, he's seen his popularity surge after Sri Lanka's economic crisis in 2022. And I think voters really sympathized with, his background and the fact that he comes from an atypical setup. He's not part of a political dynasty like his two main competitors, Sajith Premadasa, and who is a leader of the opposition, and incumbent President Wickremesinghe. So he comes from outside the system, and I think he really represented for voters the kind of system change that many people wanted after the 2022 sovereign default, and also after the widespread protests that Sri Lanka saw in the wake of economic crisis.
Can you tell us a bit more about him and the policies that he campaigned on?
Sure. So Mr. Dissanayake comes from a small farming household from the North Central province. His father was a clerk in the government survey department, and his mother was a homemaker. He himself is an eloquent speaker. He's known as a clear-headed decision maker and a consultative leader. He has been a parliamentarian since 2000 and has been a minister as well in a government of President Chandrika Kumar Tunga. And even though his party is often associated with two violent insurrections in the 1970s and 80s, it's kind of departed significantly from its more revolutionary past. And his party, the JVP, is known as a Marxist, known to have Marxist-Leninist origins, but as I mentioned, it's departed from that. His own policies are routinely mischaracterized, I would say, by his competitors, but he has he's campaigned on a very strong anti-corruption position, and he's also, in his manifesto, promised to improve export diversification through improving Sri Lankan exports. He's, pledged to increase foreign direct investment. And although there are, changes in the tax code, he's, promised to improve tax administration and so on, to improve revenue collection as well. So he is from an atypical party, but his economic policy is not as radical as his opponents would, characterize those policies as, I would say.
And Amita, what does the result tell us about the mood of Sri Lankans and where they see their future?
I think this election was really interesting because, compared to at least the 2019 presidential poll, there was a lot less ultra-nationalist rhetoric being used on the campaign trail. This campaign actually saw a lot of healthy discourse around the economy. So all the candidates, all the top contenders were actually compelled to justify their economic policies. And this really demonstrates that what's key for Sri Lankan voters is economic recovery and growth, and to really move beyond the 2022 crisis that saw, so many people really dropping in their quality of life.
Meanwhile, what are some of the immediate challenges the new government faces, and will there be a lot of new faces among those chosen for the top posts?
I think one of the main challenges that the current administration or the President Dissanayake will be facing is to to again, there's a parliamentary election that we're facing before 2025. He will have to make sure that his party secures enough seats in this general election. So that's a challenge that all contenders will face. But of course, the biggest challenge is going to be to ensure that the country grows economically. And as the president, he to see that some of the pledges that he promised, the social contract that is a manifesto, actually gets implemented. His government has been, or his presidency, his candidacy was critiqued on the lines that the JVP, the NPP has never held. Has limited experience in government. So I think for him in particular, government administration and implementation of policy is going to be challenging. So we're all excited to see how he does.
And just finally, the fact that former President Ranil Wickremesinghe was rejected at the polls, what does that tell us about the opinion of his performance and short stint at rejuvenating the economy?
Well, I think it shows us what the climate is like in Sri Lanka. Former President Wickremesinghe was very much a candidate whose campaign also highlighted the need for consistency, both in policy and also in terms of the policymakers at the helm of government. He was very much for the status quo, whereas Dissanayaka's campaign was very much about change and reform. So I think it tells us a lot about what Sri Lankans want. They want to not just have shifts in economic policy, but also they want to see manifestations of a shift in political culture and a transformation of a culture that has led to Sri Lanka being, ranked really poorly on corruption indices, and I think that's an unviable or unpalatable reality for Sri Lankans now. I think that's what the performance of Wickremesinghe shows. Although I should add that President Wickremesinghe came into power with a lower rating than he currently has at this, or has showed in this election. One way to think about it is he only had a seat, his party only had a single seat in parliament. But if we were to translate the electoral results he's produced in the country into parliamentary seats, he would be faring much better. And I think that is an indicator that Sri Lankans have looked favorably at his performance in terms of stabilizing the economy in the short term.
Really interesting to talk. Amita Arud Pragasam, thank you.
Thank you for having me.